Anyone have any interesting travel plan this summer? Since this is about day trips and fun things to do.
Waiting on you.
Good,
When we
good. I hope I can help. Where are you going? Maine. Yeah? To the beaches or the mountains?
Beaches.
That's really fun.
We've done the mountains before, huh?
Yeah.
That's great. Cold in the water up there though. Are you waiting until the end of the summer or?
Around June.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Freezing.
Kids always seem to go in anyway.
They don't care.
I don't know how that is. Do you learn how to get cold
I
or?
think so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe that happens later in life.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, my kids were always in the water, no matter how ice cold it was. Crazy.
I prefer warmer stuff.
We prefer warmer weather. So my youngest was in the ocean for vacation in Marshfield.
Wow.
Right? She ran right in.
Up to our knees.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like a polar plunge.
Yeah, right?
What part of Maine are you going to?
Beach.
Wells.
Oh,
Wells.
Wells?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I love Maine. too.
yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Have a great time.
thank you.
Well, I have an email sign up. I know none of you even know anything about me yet, but I'll tell you that I do plan to write a few more books. And if you'd like to hear about my books when they're coming out, please put your email down. I don't send more than 1 or 2 emails a whole year, so don't worry about getting spammed with a bunch of emails. But I was going to offer if anybody wanted to do it now, or I'll just leave it on the chair by the door. You can do it on your way out. Totally optional. Thank you. Sometimes I forget to even tell people about it, and then I'm like, oh, today what I forgot was my books. I usually have a suitcase full of books, and it went right out of my head when I was leaving my apartment. I can't remember the last time I completely forgot a big component of my program, but busy times, busy times. Yeah. So I think maybe at the very end of this program, there's a picture of a couple of my books, but just to tell you about them, I have written a travelogue about traveling in New Hampshire, Vermont, and the Berkshires, including a lot of this sort of things, stuff to do in New Hampshire, Vermont, and the Berkshires. It's called Inns and Adventures. 2 World War II true stories about German submarines sinking ships. Those have been a lot of fun. Hi.
Hi.
One is called So Close to Home, and it's about an American family that was aboard a freighter ship that was sunk by a German submarine in the Gulf of Mexico in 1942. And when we first heard about that story, I said, wait a minute, I feel like I know a little bit about American history, but German submarines in American waters in 1942, I had no idea. So that was a fun book, and because of that book, we wrote the next one called Abandoned Ship. And Abandoned Ship, again, is about German submarines sinking ships in World War II. But this one was a British troop ship with almost 3,000 people aboard. And what happened to a whole bunch of them. So let's see what.
Looks like a couple cars pulled in,
Okay.
so if you want to give it a few
Yeah,
minutes.
I'm still warming the crowd up.
Okay, fair enough. I'll let you get started whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Things seem good to go on our end. If you run into any tech issues,
Oh.
yell. It
Yeah.
usually won't.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to forewarn you all. This is a new screen. It works 95% of the time, but we're still working out the kinks.
I won't do anything more than what I need to do, just press the button.
Perfect.
You have a writing partner, don't you?
I have co-authored books with Michael Togus.
I know Michael.
Yeah.
I was his uncle's insurance agent.
Hi.
And his uncle was a very fascinating person.
Huh.
Knew a lot about the American Indians.
Oh, was that his uncle or his wife's uncle?
Or could have been.
I think it was his wife.
Wife's uncle.
Right now, his name is escaping me.
Yeah, me too.
Um,
It's been a lot of years.
Yeah, he was from this area, wasn't
He's
he?
from Whitman.
Yes, yes. Right. I mean, it's coming back to me. I had forgotten
He
about
taught
that.
me how to throw an addle-addle.
I've tried that. That's, yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. How far did yours go?
2 yards down. I had to go get it.
Wow.
So it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I met a guy in Florida. I used to write for a magazine in Florida, and he would hunt with an addle-addle,
Yeah.
which is a real throwback. That's like caveman stuff.
Yeah, that's before the bow and arrows.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
What is an addle-addle?
It is almost like a spear,
Yeah.
but it's on the end of like a flexible stick, right?
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
So
like,
you thread it in a little pocket like, and it's got a rope on it. And so you can get really tremendous distance
Yeah.
from it. And it is lethal.
oh yeah.
I wasn't on the collecting end, thank you. I was on the throwing end. But I can't think of his uncle's name. It's
Yeah.
a Polish name.
Huh.
But in the book about the Charles River, he talks about his uncle.
Oh,
There
okay.
was beaver hunting in the Charles River.
Oh,
Many,
really?
many years ago. Yeah.
Huh. That's funny. Yeah.
But I couldn't think of Michael's name even. Oh, well,
Yeah, I don't know if he's still making the rounds, doing these speaking engagements, but
yeah. He's been here a couple of times.
yeah. Well, for the folks who just came in, you may see a notebook making the rounds. It's if you want to write your email address down. I only send an email or two a year, like when I have a new book out. So if you're interested, put your email address down, and then when you get an email 8 months from now, go, who was, where did I meet her? How'd she get my email address?
Yeah, can we tell us what yours is, so I won't put you in spam?
What my email is?
Yes.
It's my first name, Allison, Alison, and then a period, and the number 3, and another period, and my last name, O'Leary, Oleary,
No apostrophe.
Oleary?
@gmail.com, yes. I don't know if I should wait for Julia to come back, or if I should just get going. So I was asking if anybody had any fun plans for this summer. Hopefully, this program will give you some ideas for just, day trips, or
Thank you.
the furthest this would take you would be Western Mass. So that could be an overnight. There's lots to do out there. And for your benefit, I was talking about the different book-related programs that I do. I do World War II programs because I've written a couple of World War II books. Come on in, there's plenty of room. And I did a book called Inns and Adventures, which was New Hampshire, Vermont, and the Berkshires, travel and adventures, outdoor adventures. And goodness, without my books in front of me, I'm like lost. Who am I? How did I get here? But anyway, I have also developed programs related to my books. Oh yeah, one of my other books is an Appalachian Mountain Club hiking guide called Best Day Hikes Near Boston, but it covers all of eastern Massachusetts. So I do a Hikes Through History program where I talk about the past uses of some of the land that we now have to hike on. You know, Massasoit State Park, even Burridge Pond. I really like Burridge Pond. Does anyone know if the cranes are still there? Have they been coming back?
They're back with egrets and cranes all over the place.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
was there this morning.
That's great, yeah, I like Burridge Pond. So I also had started a program based on a sailing trip that I took last summer, and it's the history of different ports from Providence, Rhode Island to Bar Harbor, Maine. So I do more programs than I have books for. But anyway, to get started on this, Microadventures was conceived because I love doing more than just a little day trip or more than just an afternoon trip. I want to really get immersed in the places that I go to. And for a small day trip, you don't need all this gear. You know, this tends to worry other people on the road. They're like, is one of those bikes going to come flying off? Or are those kayaks, you know, are they securely fastened to that vehicle? It's a little bit crazy to travel like that. A micro-adventure is something that makes you sort of excited. You have some anticipation, a little further away than you would normally go for an afternoon. Something that's both spontaneous and yet you have to plan a little bit. Something out of the ordinary, a break from the usual. And when I go adventuring and when you go adventuring, I strongly recommend putting an app on your smartphone that helps you find your way back from your adventure. I use this one right at the top. It's called GaiaGPS.com, and it allows you to track yourself. So if you go into the woods, hiking or what have you, and you get lost, a lot of the trails don't have any trail signs or they're confusing trail signs. And I mean, I do a lot of hiking. I'm awful with trail signs. If I have this app on my phone and I press go when I leave the trailhead, I know I will find my way back because it tracks you in real time, even when you put your phone on airplane mode. So you're not burning your battery up with the app. And you can even use it if, say, you go to Boston and you park your car on a side street and you aren't sure where you parked. You know, if you have that app running, you can get back and find your car again. So many of these suggestions have both a free version and a subscription version. The subscription for Gaia GPS is only $20 a year. So I consider it well worth it because I can download maps anywhere I go. I used it in Colorado, in Alaska, you know, in Florida. You can download maps to use when you're offline. Anyway, I've been lost so many times. I highly suggest that these are useful tools when you're out adventuring. And there are so many adventures to be had in Massachusetts. The state is only 190 miles east to west and 115 miles maximum north to south, but almost a quarter of our 5 million acres is conserved in some way. What an incredible benefit for all of us that we can access so much of the state. Lots of watersheds, which are great habitat for wild animals, historical and cultural spots, other threatened habitats. Just to get started, the Massachusetts State Parks interactive map on Wikipedia looks like this. There are, what's my total number of state parks? I would guess, you know, almost 100 state parks. 29 of them have campgrounds, 87 of beaches, 2,000 miles of trails. And if you use this Wikipedia map, each one of those green dots is the location of a state park. If you mouse over the green dot, a box pops up like this and tells you about that spot. If you click on the box, it takes you right to the state park website or maybe the Wikipedia site for that state park. But like this, Bash Bish Falls State Park, way out here in the southwestern corner of the state. The highest waterfall in the entire state is about a 40-foot waterfall. Nothing too spectacular. We're not talking about Yellowstone or anything here. But, you know, it's a great way to sort of see what's out there and narrow down your options. If you're going to take a long trip all the way to Western Mass and you think, boy, it's going to be hot, maybe we'll find a spot along the way where we can stop and take a swim or something. This is an awesome resource to do that with. And of course, they're trustees of reservations. There are 100 of their properties in the state, representing 27,000 acres, many with cultural or historical significance. I'm trying to think of one nearby, a trustee's property nearby.
In Hingham?
Oh, yeah, World's End. Yep, that's a great one.
Too, I think.
Mhm.
There's one in Pembroke too.
Okay, yep. Well, I always suggest ask at your library to see if they have passes. And if your library doesn't have passes, did you know that you can get a library card at any library if they have a pass and borrow the pass? Because, you know, if you're going to go out on adventures on a regular basis, it's a good thing to have. You save a lot of money that way. Some of the locations that, oh yeah, I was just asking. I was just looking at the Governor Ames estate today because my mother and I have been visiting museums all over the state of Massachusetts, and I do a program on the best small museums in Massachusetts. And the trustees actually have many of them because they have estates that people have left with them. This masstrails.com is a site that offers information on all of the rail trails in Massachusetts. Each one of those red kites is a different rail trail. And when you click on that red kite, it gives you information about the entire trail. You know, the length that's finished, that's really important because some of our rail trails are interrupted in different places where they have to still acquire property and finish the trail itself. I live up here in the Worcester area. We have a beautiful rail trail that is eventually going to stretch from Boston to Northampton. It's called the Mass Central Rail Trail. And right now, there are some pretty good stretches of it in Central Mass that are just beautiful, especially in the fall when the leaves start to change. And then if that weren't enough, somebody had to go to the Mass Trails big map. They added all of the conservation land and accessible spaces to that map with all the red kites. So it gives you an idea of like, wow, if I really want to explore an area, one that I talk about later is down in this area. I think this is the Snet Trail. It's a very long rail trail, and it goes into a state forest. So that's one that you'll hear about, I believe. So we have over 50 rail trails in the state. They're great for people who don't want to walk in the woods, but want to be away from traffic and, you know, something better than a sidewalk. Because most of the time, they're at least finished to a very fine degree, if not paved. Many of them are not paved, but they'll have that stone dust surface and be in really good shape without a lot of ruts. So you don't have to worry about tripping and falling if you needed to push a stroller or something. They're usually, good for that. So we have over 347 miles, very flat and family friendly. Now, the picture of my daughter there is not actually on a Massachusetts rail trail because I love the Blackstone River Bikeway, which stretches from Woonsocket, Rhode Island, all the way down to Providence, 18 miles each way. I always say, if you haven't ridden a bike or walked that far, don't go out and try to do it all in one day. You know, take your time. You could do piece by piece. See what is in the area that interests you. They have a lot of historic sites along the bike path. so that you could go and park at the historic site, take a nice stroll up and down the bike path. It follows the Blackstone River. The entire length of the path is right along the river. So there are spillways, sort of waterfalls that you enjoy, places to picnic. So for the real actual locations I'm suggesting for day trips, you start out in northwestern Massachusetts, actually, yeah, Mount Greylock is a little more over in here, not quite up in that corner where the arrow is. Mount Greylock is a 3,100-foot mountain that has been the site of hiking trails since the 1840s. One of the very first places that people in the area started to clear trails for hiking. And at the summit is this wonderful monument, which is a peace monument with a beacon on the top that is on day and night, all year round, except for when it might interfere with bird migration. Then they shut it off. But it has a, excuse me, a museum in the base of it, and what a fantastic place for hiking. There are many, many trails, but you can also drive to the summit. So if you're not up for going up and down the steep trails, you can come up this curlicue road, park right there at the summit, and just walk along the summit. Enjoy the tower and the views, and you don't have to venture down into this hopper trail, excuse me, frog in my throat, and Stony Ledge, which was a favorite, has been a long-time favorite of folks who like to hike out there. The hopper is a huge feature of the mountain. It's almost like a big chunk of the mountain fell away, and so it's this concave section where, excuse me, it's a bit of a ravine with some waterfalls coming down one end of it. And if you go in July and you hook up with the Berkshire hikers, you can reenact Henry David Thoreau's famous hike out there. He got in a little hot water in Concord more than once. One time he actually was fishing in the Merrimack River, caught a bunch of fish, was very excited about it, and decided, I'm not going to wait until I get home. I'm going to start a campfire right here and cook these fish and eat them. So he started a little campfire, cooked the fish. It was windy, the fire got out of control and burned like 300 acres. All of Concord was up in arms trying to put this thing out. It was a disaster. So more than once he was kind of the object of scorn in his hometown. And that's part of the story that I learned about why he went to Mount Greylock. He went out there to sort of let things cool down back in Concord and do a little penance by hiking up the mountain. So he hiked partway up and it got dark, and so he sort of buried himself in a little hole in the ground and covered himself with his coat and waited until daylight. And then he wrote eventually, as the light increased, I discovered around me an ocean of mist, which by chance reached up to exactly the base of the tower and shut out every vestige of the earth. So that monument is on the summit of Greylock to Thoreau in his quest for sort of penance and absolution. Hiking can be transformational for many different reasons, just to clear your mind or to work through a problem. So as I said, in July of every year, people will go hike specifically to follow his path and to see what he experienced out on Mount Greylock. So the views from the summit, even though it isn't a huge mountain, are just as beautiful as many of the really big mountains up in the White Mountains, for instance. And if you just go up the road a little bit into the town of North Adams, as I said, I was going to intersperse this with a few museums. This is the home of Mass MoCA, the second largest museum of modern art in the entire country. And it's really, when I talk to audiences in Eastern Mass, they're like, oh yeah, I've never been there. I've heard of it, but I've never been there. It is fabulous. Definitely worth the trip. And go early because you want to spend the entire day there. It used to be a manufacturing facility called Sprague Electric that made components for military aircraft, for spacecraft, even space exploration. It shut down in 1999, and some local people had the vision of turning it into this enormous museum. There are over 26 buildings. And you know, those old industrial buildings had giant windows, so incredible light for just sprawling exhibits of all different kinds. I had a great time when I was out there, and a current exhibitor is Laurie Anderson. She's the musical artist, so to speak, from say the 1980s. She has gone off in a different direction, and she does performance art, and she does this kind of art. Chalk Room is through the rest of the summer, I believe. So when you're out in that area, there is another great rail trail. It runs from Adams, so up near North Adams, to Lanesboro, 14 miles long on an 1840s era rail bed. I cannot say this name without tripping all over myself, so do what you can with it, but beautiful views, goes through some lovely areas out there in Western Mass. And also nearby is Williamstown, Mass, which is way up in the northwest corner of the state. And it is just picture postcard perfect New England. Wonderful place to visit, several colleges. The Clark Art Institute is also out there, and their galleries, and they also have a big campus to explore. Lots of farms in the area, and beautiful scenery. So now if you venture down into the Connecticut River Valley, this is a place I learned to love when my two youngest went to UMass Amherst, because it's so different from Eastern Mass. And I often tell people, if you get tired of hiking under a canopy of trees, go to Burridge Pond, where it's wide open and you can be out in the sun, right? Similar out here, because along the Connecticut River Valley is just a wide open area of gorgeous vistas like this. This is a little grainy, but you can see a long way, especially if you go up to the Summit House in Skinner State Park, which is right alongside the river, and it used to be a hotel. It was given to the state in, I believe it was like 1897. They refurbished it just a couple years ago. It's now 10 years ago. So they refurbished it, and it's a visitor center at the state park. They also do a lot of concerts here, so great opportunity to take a picnic dinner and sit outside, enjoy the views and some music. As I said, I can't say enough about the views, right? Because it is so flat, and you're only up at, I think it was, how many feet was that? I have to look at the picture. 942, Mount Holyoke. So not a really tough climb if you choose to do so, or you can go up to the summit and enjoy the hike, or just walk along the ridge and have those views the whole time. If Skinner State Park is too crowded, you can go just up the river a little bit to Sugarloaf, which also has this lookout tower. Less busy, same great view, right? And it was also the site of a Mel Gibson movie, Edge of Darkness. I'm sure that was late 80s, but
He literally just watched that like 2 days ago.
no way.
Yeah.
Was it any good?
That's great.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I might have watched it in the past, but I can't remember a single thing about movies, so I'll take your recommendation.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Was it like a thriller?
Thriller action, yeah.
Woo! Do you recognize Sugarloaf? No. Okay, well then, that's where it was filmed though. So again, a lovely place to hike around the summit or just at the summit and enjoy those views of the river. Last chance, view of the Connecticut River. Beautiful, isn't it? And also out that way is the modest town of Northampton, full of little shops. I do understand that they got hit pretty hard by COVID and some things closed, of course, but it was always a place when my kids were in school that we would go and find a new little bakery or a couple of restaurants and always something to do. I rode this rail trail into Northampton with my daughter. I think I'd talk about it in a minute. And we got into the center of Northampton and there was actually a ukulele orchestra playing on the common, which was so fun. But Northampton is just a little different like that. Also, the other thing, if you're a crafter at all, let's see, if I'm oriented correctly, the block behind these buildings, there is the largest, like, warehouse size retail area for yarn and quilting materials. It's huge. It makes me wish that I could do that stuff, but I know I have no talent for that stuff. So when you're out in that area, there is there's 5 museums and a sculpture garden all in the Springfield area. Oftentimes there's one pass that will get you into all or any of them. If you can get one from a library, you've got Dr. Seuss Museum and Sculpture Park, Museum of Fine Arts, the Science Museum, Art Museum, and Museum of Springfield History. And just a little further west on Route 9 from Northampton is Chesterfield Gorge, which is a Trustees of Reservations property. It's a very deep gorge with high rocky walls, and if you look closely, you can see the remnants of an old toll bridge that used to be in there. That's kind of neat, but you walk along these old carriage roads in the vicinity of the water, and you can just tell, like, it's cooler when you're near the water due to the spray from it churning up against the rocks. Great place to go in the summertime. And here's that rail trail that I was talking about. I had ridden with my daughter. It has this beautiful bridge that crosses the Connecticut River. We'd start way back in Amherst up here and ride it into Northampton and back, but it actually goes all the way from Belchertown. This was the first state-created rail trail in Massachusetts. They're, I think Cape Cod Rail Trail was maybe second, but after that, after the state sort of stepped in and did those 2 rail trails, then it was smaller nonprofit organizations are trying to piece together other ones. So it's amazing what people have done in the intervening years. I think this rail trail was created in the late 80s, so it's been around quite some time. But it's, to put together another 300 miles of rail trails since then, all with small organizations, is pretty impressive. So North Central Massachusetts is an area that I have recently come to really appreciate because, as I said, I live in the Worcester area, and one of my daughters has dragged me up here to go camping a couple of summers. This is called the Tully Summit. The whole area was sort of sculpted by the Army Corps of Engineers. They created a bunch of dams back in the 1950s and 60s to make this a watershed area. And in doing so, they've created a lot of recreation space, basically. It's conservation land that won't be built on. So there's over 50 miles of roads with several state parks. This is Tully Lake, which is, let's see, on this end there is a Corps of Engineers dam. So the lake was man-made, and there is a walking trail all the way around the perimeter. You can also take trails up to Long Lake here, or Long Pond, and then there's a really long trail that goes all the way around this way. That's like 20 miles. Ooh, I forgot this is touchscreen. I should kind of be careful. But if you just wanted to get to that summit, you can do so by just coming up this way to the summit for that beautiful view. And there is a trustees reservations campground right on the shore of Tully Lake with at least 35 sites, and almost every single one of them is waterfront. This was our site. We had a lot of fun there. I took my granddaughter in the canoe, with her little Barbie fishing pole. Of course, every 3 seconds, I think I got something. I think I got something. Another stick and another leaf. This whole area, as I said, is just plenty of opportunities to hike, camp, fish. There's state forest. There's another waterfall up here at Royalston. This is Tully Lake. There's a big waterfall here called Doan's Falls. We've also camped down here at Otter River State Forest. And all of this is accessible on dirt roads. But, snowmobiles use it in the wintertime. Mountain bikers use it. You can hike around there. There's a picture of Doan's Falls, which empties into Tully Lake. Really picturesque, lovely. And when I'm out in the woods, I have to remember to look up as well as looking down, because a lot of times I am cross-country skiing or hiking or something, and I only notice animal tracks, and I don't remember to look up and see like the big obvious, wow, a whole heron rookery somewhere. So there are lots of maps online, including Mass Wildlife. They have some really helpful interactive maps for planning trips like this. This is part of the Millers River when I was out there cross-country skiing in the wintertime. This is the river that was dammed that created Tully Lake, I believe. And there are the remnants of the only community in the area. This was called New Boston, and there's really just the cemetery left. A little bit creepy. Be neat to go there with some middle schoolers around Halloween, right? And scare the daylights out of them. But also in Central Mass is the Quabbin Reservoir, which was created to deliver drinking water to Boston. And they dammed the Swifts River in the 1930s and created this 18-mile long body of water with 181 miles of shoreline. Much of it is accessible with lots of old roads in the woods that you can follow. Some of them, if you're cruising along, all of a sudden just go into the water and stop. You're not allowed to swim, so you can't continue on that road. But when the Quabbin was created, it wiped out these old towns, Prescott, Greenwich, Enfield, and Dana. So the towns were literally leveled. They took all of the buildings down, all of the graves out, any man-made structure got shipped off, and the people were reburied in another town. They made a Quabbin cemetery, but there are remnants of towns there. So what I like to do is go to this gate 40, where you can hike in an old road to the town common of a town that no longer exists. And if you go a little bit further, you can hike all the way to the waterfront, and there's almost never anybody there. So you feel like you're the last person on earth. Here's a before picture. You can it's a little grainy because it's very old, from the 1920s, but you can sort of see where there were buildings and roads in this community. And then when they even took all the trees down. They just wiped it out, and then this is after the dam was created and it filled in. This is the town center that you can go visit. Of course, it doesn't look like that anymore. It's called the town of Dana. The buildings were all taken down, even though they wouldn't have been underwater. When they said these towns are going to go, they really took everything. But you can follow old roads around all day long. Make sure you use that GPS tracker. I don't want to hear any stories about people getting lost out there. There are no signs, I mean, they took the street signs. There are no signs that tell you where you're going, so you've got to be very careful and self-sufficient. Again, this is the hike that I was talking about. It's like 2 miles into the town center from that gate 40, and then another 2 miles if you wanted to go to the waterfront. And you can sit on the beach. As I said, you can't swim, but it's a wonderful picnicking spot, place to watch for wildlife, and you feel like you're the last person on earth. There's nobody around. So, when my daughter and I were camping out there at Tully Lake, of course, the minute I put a tent up, the downpours begin. So that was even a summer when there was a drought, but the drought didn't start until after I took my tent down. So we had 3 days of rain and 2 little kids with us, and it was like, what are we gonna do? So Tully Lake is out in this area. We did a DIY Antiques Roadshow and hit a whole bunch of places up there on Route 2A and 202. Lots of places out in central Massachusetts where they'll have a big antique barn full of stuff, or there are old downtown areas. People have started secondhand shops and things like that. Just something to do on a rainy day, what can I say? And of course, there's Brimfield Flea Market Antiques Fair. Has anyone been to that out by Sturbridge? It is a lot of fun. These are the dates. We just had one 3-day period, was just this past week, but July 9th to 14th and September 3 to 8 is just like miles and miles of antiques of every kind. Not all antiques either. Some sculptures, some whimsical, interesting, different stuff. It's a feast for the eyes. I just wish that they had better like food opportunities, because when I was there were like 4 or 5 food stands and like nothing else to eat. So, but when you're in Central Mass, so many places to stop, lots of farm stands. There's the Fruitlands Museum in Harvard, Mass, which sort of, if you could see off in the distance, Mount Wachusett is out there on the horizon. Fruitlands was a utopian settlement back in the 1840s by the father of Louisa May Alcott. His name was Bronson Alcott, and he was a transcendentalist. And he believed in living lightly upon the land, like not harming, almost like a vegan would be today, not harming another living thing. So his family almost revolted against him because he got so much into this ethos of not harming anything that he really left all of the work of feeding the family to his wife and his young daughters. And that didn't go over so well. So in 1910, a woman bought their farm and 450 acres and made this entire museum complex. There's a portrait gallery, a Shaker museum, a Native American museum, and the Alcott Farm, and they have a cafe on site. So it's a nice long visit. They have walking trails. They also have a lot of events there. They'll do owl walks and musical performances, things like that. So now where are we? Okay, talking about the rivers, streams and rivers in Massachusetts. There are, I think, over 5,000 miles of streams and rivers in Massachusetts, but only, 5,000 seems like a lot, doesn't it? Only 2 are designated wild and scenic, the Taunton and the Nashua River. And that's a federal designation, meaning that it's clean and it's free of barriers so the fish can spawn up the river. The Nashua River Rail Trail is a beautiful opportunity to enjoy the woods along the Nashua River from the towns of Ayer through Groton and Pepperell all the way to the New Hampshire border. And if you would rather paddle it than ride a bike or walk, This website, the Nashua River Watershed website, that's a tongue twister, offers a lot of detailed information about places where you can launch a kayak or canoe and pull it out. So if you were going to put it in at this boat launch and plan to take it out upstream, you have a real clear picture of what the river is going to look like along the way. And again, that great GPS tracker, I swear I'm not getting any kickbacks from this. That GPS tracker works for boating as well. Anytime you're outdoors exploring, there is a kayak rental place, I believe in Pepperell, called the Neshoba Paddler, where you can actually rent boats or take a guided tour with them just to see the river. But just knowing that the river is wild and scenic kind of interests me, because you know that it's in a natural state that'll be worth seeing. And not too far away in the town of Groton, there's this really neat, like, medieval type tower on the top of Gibbet Hill. It's called Bancroft Castle, and it belongs to the town, so it's okay to hike up there and check it out. I thought it would be really neat for, say, engagement pictures or a senior picture or, you know, something like that. Everyone is looking at Instagram-worthy places these days, or maybe a reenactment of Rapunzel, I don't know. The story behind it is that Mr. Bancroft was a very wealthy man back in the late 1800s, but when he went to build his elaborate estate out here on Gibbet Hill, he only built this tower and then a cottage. I think it was kind of a large cottage. I don't think this was like a, you know, a little one-room cottage. I think it was pretty big. And then he ran out of money. So he willed it to an organization, the Hunt Club, I believe, in town. They used it for many years for parties and gatherings. And one time somebody's fireworks got a little out of hand and burned the building down. So all that is left is the tower. But it's pretty cool. Might be worth hiking up a hill to take a look at it. Now, South Central Mass, an area that I recommend, a great state park to visit, is Douglas State Forest and Wallum Lake. Very clean water. I always point out that this is a great beach because it has shade. It has a lot of shade. You don't have to be sitting back in the parking lot to get out of the sun at the beach. You can actually be on the beach, beautiful trees all around, and keep an eye on whoever's in the water, as you know, I'm sort of programmed to do after raising my kids and now have grandkids. But there are lots of other places within the state forest to explore, including the Tri-State Monument. So if you go up to this monument in the woods, you can be in 3 states at once, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, if you can figure out how to get on top of it or wrap your arms around it or something like that. It is close to, not quite on, the Snet railroad bed that I mentioned before, which is slowly becoming one of the long rail trails. It was called the Southern New England Trunk Trail, and you can follow it from Blackstone through the woods. You have to make some connection with Route 146 and then follow it again into the state park. And if you continue through Thompson, Connecticut, then you can get on the Airline Trail, which is one of their long rail trails in Connecticut. I decided to do it one cold and drizzly weekend in November, and I think I came up with at least 22 miles of it. Some of it very much unimproved, but it was fun. And there's also Purgatory Chasm State Park, which is a big ravine that people have visited since the early 1900s, where you can climb on the rocks, you can take paths through the rocks. There are also a couple of places where big rocks have split, so you can squeeze in like a little crack. I mean, it's not a little crack if it's big enough to squeeze into, but you have to sort of walk sideways and try not to hyperventilate until you get to the other end. And very close to that is the West End Creamery, which is a farm that makes its own ice cream, has mini golf, and a corn maze in the fall. Also in South Central Mass, in the town of Webster, is a fabulous museum that I talk about a lot in my museum program. It's called the Samuel Slater Experience. And it is based on the life of a young man named Samuel Slater who came from England in the late 1700s, early 1800s. He had been an apprentice in a mill in England, and their mills were much more advanced than our mills in the United States. And he was told that because his family wasn't of good breeding or whatever, he couldn't advance past a certain point in the management of the mill in England. So he said, the heck with you, I'm getting on a boat going to America. He came over here and started helping people develop their mills into much more high tech, for 1820, and eventually became partners with a guy, and they started developing their own mills. The town of Webster would not exist if he hadn't developed the biggest mill in South Central Massachusetts. Long story short, the museum is super cool because the man who developed it used the best technology in museums these days. So you go into a room that looks like this, it looks like an old-time mill office, where the overseer would keep his books and that sort of thing. And a screen shows a conversation between two characters in period costume and talking about the mill issues. And it's not just this room. Every room is a little bit different. One is the ship that he came over in. And my mother and I were standing on the deck of this ship, hearing this story, that's broadcast into the room. And I'm getting a little sprinkle of water. I'm like, what is that? She says, it's the waves, of course. And they have a little spritzer thing, so you feel like, the boat is hitting waves.
That's so cool.
It's really a neat museum. Highly recommended. So now up in northeastern Mass, the Ipswich River is 35 miles long, goes through an Audubon wildlife sanctuary that is home to a lot of bird life, of course, and attracts a lot of migrating birds. What I have done when I've been up there is to go to this kayak rental place, leave my car there, they'll throw a couple of kayaks in the back of a truck, drive you down to where you start, and you just float back down the river until you get back to your car. Or you can visit the river from the Bradley Palmer State Park. The river literally flowed under Bradley Palmer's driveway there. He was a very well-to-do Bostonian. Back around 1900, he was one of the founding partners of the Palmer and Dodge law firm, which a few years ago was very well known in Boston. And he was a friend of Woodrow Wilson's. He participated in the Armistice Agreement for World War I, the Paris Conference. And then he decided he needed to take it easy, getting on in years. So he went up to Ipswich and he bought 740 acres just to start a little farm where he could ride his horses. So his home still stands, and it was eventually turned into a state park, so it belongs to us. Yeah. You can go check out the trails on the property, go inside the home as long as there's no event going on. You can rent it, and they have ranger tours of both the inside of the home and the exterior property. There's beautiful craftsmanship throughout the building. They'll tell you about the history of it and about Bradley Palmer himself. It's a very popular park. Also on the North Shore there in Cape Ann, there's an interesting place up there called Dogtown. And Dogtown is in Gloucester. Have you heard of it? Dogtown is in Gloucester. And it is an area where there was a lot of granite quarries. So there are a lot of those deep holes and slag laying around and stuff. And apparently, way, way back in time, in the 1700s, when the whaling business was still going on, several of the widows of the whaling sailors and captains moved to this area of town because they were getting poor. Their husbands had been lost at sea. They didn't have any money to subsist on, so they moved to Dogtown. And the legend is that some of them were witches. So you had to bring them offerings so that they wouldn't curse you. So people would bring them fish or food or something, and supposedly the women would allow them safe passage through the neighborhood. The name Dogtown is because wild dogs or stray dogs went there as well, I believe. But now it's an area of a lot of trails. Of course, the women's homes no longer exist. But back in the 1930s, unfortunately, in the depths of the Depression, there was a guy from Boston named Roger Babson, founder of Babson College. He had made a lot of money on the stock market. And Roger Babson thought that he could do something inspirational. He could get people out of the rut called the Great Depression by having stone carvers go up into Dogtown and putting inspirational inscriptions on some rocks. Well, he was very tone deaf. Get a job. Remember your mother. There are lots of these oddball expressions.
Remember the Depression.
Yeah, in the middle of the Depression, honest to God. But I've been up there. It's kind of neat. The paths in the woods. You try and find there's a stone at every house. I think there were 18 houses in the woods there. So if you can find all of the stones and then all of Babson's stones, something to do if you're up in the Gloucester area. Now, if you have visitors coming in the summertime and you are at a loss of what to do with them, I love Boston Harbor Islands. There are many islands, of course, in Boston Harbor, very historic area. There were forts on a couple of them, Fort Standish, Fort Strong, basically to keep invaders from coming into Boston and taking over. George's Island is 7 miles offshore, it's 40 acres, and it has a Civil War fortress on it. In the summertime, they often will have activities there and things to do. They'll have bands playing, characters in costume. You may run into, Paul Revere or somebody out there on George's Island. So you get a ferry from downtown Boston. I think the ferry might also go from Hingham to George's Island. Yep. It's almost spitting distance from Nantasket to George's Island. But wonderful place to walk, cool ocean breezes, fun to visit this is not the highway at rush hour. This is Boston Harbor during the Revolution.
Same thing.
Yeah, right. So this is Fort Warren on George's Island, and you're allowed to just go in and explore all of it. It's a nice, cool place to visit in the summertime. And much of the granite for the fortress came from Quincy Quarries just across the harbor, which was also where the granite for the Bunker Hill Monument came from. And I think, are we on the last slide? You have to really imagine going back in time for this one. This was around 1900, the Appalachian Mountain Club, which of course has been, an outdoors club for more than 100 years. They had some property not too far from Boston alongside a nice quiet cart path, and they decided to build a camp there. It's near Ponkapog Pond, which unfortunately is now surrounded by massive highways. There's 8 lanes of traffic going east-west here, and there's 8 lanes of traffic going north-south there. So it's not the quiet little campground that it used to be back around 1900, but you can still rent a really quaint cabin there for a weekend or for an entire week. The club owns 20 of them, and there's a big old lodge, log cabin type lodge in the middle of it, where they have the old get-togethers, potluck dinners and sing-alongs and movie night if you're there in the summertime. They're actually for rent all year long, so it's a great spot to remember for maybe a little getaway, something different. They have screened porches, wood-burning stoves, bunk beds, and there is a path that goes all the way around Ponkapaga Pond. Some of it is pretty rugged and takes a little, effort. Another part of it looks more like a dam. This part here, when I was visiting the cabins and decided I was going to ride my bike around, it's only about 4 miles around, I was putting my helmet on and one of the caretakers said, "Oh, you're going to ride around the pond?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Glad you got your helmet." I said, "Why are you glad I have my helmet?" He says, "Because the golf course opened on the other side and the path literally goes right down alongside some of the golf course." So I'm thinking, I'm going to duck a little bit here, There's also a trail that goes into a wetlands area on these sort of floating bridge thing. It's a little dicey at times. And that's the end of my talk. So does anyone have any questions? I appreciate you being a very nice audience tonight. I wish I had remembered my books. I can't believe what an airhead I was this afternoon. But you can order them if you're interested from my website. Anyone have any great spots that they like to get away to?
We haven't been there in a while, but has anyone heard of the Beckett Land Trust in Western Mass? So, is it called anything? What's it, oh, it's just that?
I'll look it up. It
So basically it's like wasn't it an old quarry
was a granite quarry.
that in the 19-something, it was just closed suddenly because they went out of business and they just left old trucks
Okay,
and
is
like,
that the one with all the trucks are on the side?
yeah, there's like a bunch of just old things they left there. And there's like wires, like old wires, cables everywhere, like the old fashioned wooden cranes.
Right.
Just like left. And I think it's like you donate a little bit to go in and you walk 10 minutes and there's like an old truck in the woods and
Oh.
you can just walk all around. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, highly recommend it. It's
Very
way out in
interesting.
Western Mass. I think it's near Palmer or it's like way west.
Yeah, I can't look anything up. I have no service.
Okay, no worries.
Thanks for that. Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware in Ponkapog on New Year's Day, they have hikes?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
right.
They have all different lengths,
You're right.
around the pond, up the hill, and then
Yep.
when you get through, you have some cocoa.
Right.
And it's
Yes.
really been a nice tradition to do that.
Yeah, that was the first place where they started doing the New Year's Day hikes
Yeah.
in the Blue Hills. Yeah.
I don't know if they still have the hatch harriers.
Oh.
I did that a few times, but I haven't
Really?
heard about them for a few years. Even though
Yeah.
I'm not a runner, it was fun to go up the trails and then, you came to a dead end, gotta go back and
Uh-huh.
see. So I was
Yeah.
wondering if that was still going on.
Oh, I have not heard about the Harriers in years myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a friend who was very involved, but I don't know. Yeah, the Blue Hills are fun to hike in. Another place where I say, gotta have one of these trackers. Because I go in there and I'm lost, completely lost. On the New Year's Day hike one year, I took one of my daughters with me. This is gonna be fun, another outing with mom. It was a beautiful day when we started, but it was a huge crowd of people. And so we're following along, it was like 75 people on this hike. And it wasn't much fun, so I said, "Hey Grace, let's take our own hike." So we turned and we went down another trail and we started hiking, and then it started raining and it was miserable, and I was like, okay, let's try and find the car. Lost, so lost. We ended up like climbing over a railing, going down a hill to a highway, walking along the highway until we saw something we recognized. Fortunately, I had enough money in my pocket for Dunkin' Donuts to get her a hot cocoa, or she would have just
Yeah.
killed me. I swear. She was about 10. She hasn't let me forget that.
The Blue Hills Museum is nice too.
Right.
We've done their trail too, the one where you had to follow directions really exact.
Uh-huh.
And get a treasure.
Yeah.
And you bring a treasure to leave and you take one.
And they just redid the Trailside Museum
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, they have animal exhibits.
Right.
Right.
So my purpose saying it's local.
Yes.
Yeah, and that many people may have known all that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Other place, I don't know if it's as like nature focused, but I was around the Lowell area for over a year and a half, and I was shocked at how much history and art is in the area. If anyone looks for a good day trip, they have like a historic, like a nonprofit history organization right in downtown, and they do like walks all around the city with history, and they have like an underground river system that used to feed all the mills, and they actually do like boat tours of the rivers all over Lowell.
Wow.
It's a national park.
Yeah,
Right.
national park. They also have a lot of really good restaurants, like ethnic food. They have festivals all year. They have like a kinetic sculpture race every September that we always go to.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard of that?
Would they
before?
do it on the river?
Yeah, and like it's different groups that make like man-made sculptures that move, and like it's a competition.
To go over cobblestones, through mud,
Yeah,
travel on the street, and then go through the river, and it's a lot of fun.
That sounds like.
Yeah, and you can, if you ride your bicycle there, you can go with the police detail and with those groups and ride until, to each section of the
Yeah.
race.
and old mill buildings all over.
Yeah.
And they do like tours, and there's museums everywhere. It's really
Yeah,
cool area.
there's a quilt museum up there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's a great spot.
Definitely a lot of good food.
Yeah.
I really love going up there to the festivals.
Oh, and Boarding House Park concerts.
Yes.
They have, like the jazz
Thursday.
festival.
Yeah. Some really good music.
I've lived in Wall for 20 years.
Ah, there you go. Any other ideas, suggestions to share? Well, I won't keep you. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Nice meeting everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful summer.
Thank you.